Welcome to There Is a Method to the Madness. My name is Rob Maxwell, and I'm an exercise physiologist and personal trainer. I'm the owner of Maxwell's Fitness Programs, and I've been in business for the last 28 years. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about crap food. In other words, what's the middle ground we can all agree on? That's what I'm going to talk a little bit about today. Before I do that, though, I want to thank our sponsors, Jonathan and Lynn Gilden, at the Gilden Group at Realty Pros. They currently have over 275 star reviews on Zillow, and they've sold over 100 million between the two of them. They're absolutely great at what they do. I absolutely vouch for them. If you need or if you would like any real estate assistance, please give them a call at 386-451-2412. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that middle ground a little bit. I got thinking about it, trying to think of a topic this morning, and I was thinking about there's always a balance when I make the podcast. What do I like to talk about? Maybe that's not what everybody wants to listen to. That's probably very, very true. This thing would be oftentimes about baseball or sports and things that I like, music, but not my expertise. What do people need to hear? And I think that is critical. And what do they want to hear? They, as in you. And that's important too. You know, I look at the statistics and I'm blown away sometimes at like, wow, people don't like that subject, or they do like this subject and it gets like replayed and things like that. So it's interesting. And you could probably guess which direction that those flow in, of what the people actually want to hear. Normally it's about food. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about food today, but I'm going to try to convince everyone to kind of come up with the old middle road on eating, something we can all agree on, hopefully agree on. And if you don't agree on it, well, you're wrong. So, but you'll see what I mean by that. Now, before I get too far into that, I want to just put this out there. This isn't about low carb, no carb, low fat, no fat, and all that. That's not about that, because if you already think that that's a thing, then you're already missing the whole message. There is no such thing as low carbohydrate diets being beneficial and all that. That just doesn't happen. So sorry if you tuned in to hopefully find the middle ground there. You're not going to find it. That's not what this is about. I mean, it's all about balancing calories as far as our weight management goes. So if we eat more carbohydrate calories or protein calories or fat calories more than we need, we are going to gain weight. I'll just pretty much just say this one more time here today, and that is that carbohydrates are simply easier to eat than the majority of other foods. They taste good. They're easy on the stomach. They're easy to digest, so we tend to eat a lot more of them. That's the problem, not the carbohydrate themselves. It's the fact that we eat more than we actually need of them. All right, so I left that there. Leave it alone. Now let's talk about the middle ground I think we should all find. There is the paleo folks out there, the carnivores, and again, a lot of that, the new name paleo, and I said that on purpose, is, was brought about by a group of people that said, let's go back to the beginnings of time, and that's how cavemen eat, and blah, 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 blah. Cavemen, that sounded funny. That's how they ate. And, they would go back to Paleolithic times. It's like, well, research has confirmed that that's not true, that just depends on what part of the world you lived in and what the food substance was where you were, and a multitude of different foods. We actually are omnivores as a species, meaning we can digest both meat and we can digest plants. That's not true for all animals, but that's what we are. So the reality is, depending on where we lived, is what we ate. End of story. That could have been completely plant-based, that could have been completely meat-based, that could have been completely, or not completely, but 50% one, 50% the other. It just really depended on where we were. So there is no paleo diet. Okay, so that's another fact we just need to understand. So then you have people that are complete vegans. And, again, It's the thought process, this is absolutely best, this is what humans are meant to be, and da-da-da-da-da, and the teeth prove it, and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, well, again, that's a whole nother argument in some ways, but again, we're omnivores. So we can digest both plant, we can digest animal, okay? We can digest meat, we can digest plant. I will say this, though, think about this. We can't eat raw meat, so there is something to that. We can eat raw vegetables, but we can't eat raw meat. Other animals can. So there is that side of the debate, but again, I'm going to leave that for a better time, because what I think is we need middle ground. Like, we need commonsensical middle ground. Let's have one enemy. Let's not have like all these different debates going back and forth, which literally don't do us a whole lot of good. Now, I'm plant-based. That means plant-based. That means the majority of what I eat is plant-based. It doesn't mean that I won't have something else from time to time. I honestly can't remember the last time I had chicken or fish, but it hasn't been that long, especially I think fish. Occasionally I'll have some dairy type substance. I don't want to eat it. I just don't, but I'm going to get into like how that can be done a little bit better. But for the most part, I just don't think, and this is opinion because the studies again say they're mixed on this, that we're not supposed to digest it per se, other animals' milk. But at the same time, the research doesn't totally nail it. It's back and forth, but again, that's just my opinion. But I do that. My point is that I am plant-based, not plant-exclusive. There's a difference. That's just my own personal take on things. A lot of it has to do with the fact that I may or may not have mentioned before on the podcast, but when I was doing more competitive bodybuilding in my 20s, and I was following all of what we all thought we were supposed to do in my 20s, which was the 1990s, I guess, 80s or 90s, yeah. So I ate so much freaking chicken all the time that I literally just got grossed out by it. And, and I'll get into this part. It's kind of a good lead way into it. Part of the reason why I got grossed out is because I would get chicken breasts from anywhere. And I can remember going to Sam's and getting those packages of chicken breasts because they were cheaper, and then you can cook them all up. And it was like, oh my God, I was like eating this like styrofoam. It was so gross. And I literally, I'm not getting nauseous right now talking about it, but I'm like, it does turn my stomach a little bit just thinking about it because I ate so much of it, And so I got to the point where I just couldn't stand what supposedly is the best meat for you, which is white meat chicken. And so it's kind of easy for me to give it up because, quite frankly, the only way I really, really, really like it is fried, and that is just not good for me, right? But tastes good. Who wouldn't like that? Of course I do. What tastes better than Kentucky Fried Chicken, right? But it is garbage food. But the point is that to eat a healthy, nice chunk of chicken, for me, it just doesn't taste good. So it's an easy give up. And beef I gave up long ago. So that's just my preference. But I do believe wholeheartedly in natural foods. And that's what this is about today, I was speaking about this with a client this morning, which is what prompted this podcast today. It's like the one thing I will definitely go out and say, convinced about is we do have to eat healthy options of whatever we eat. And I said to this client, which they had heard the term before and they agreed with it, it's not necessarily what we eat, it's what we eat eats. And that is so true. And most of the research I've seen and studied now is a lot more about that. Because look, there's absolutely no question that, it's my podcast, I can talk about what I want, that I'm definitely an animal rights advocate. Like, I just think that cruelty has no place in this world. There is no doubt in my mind on that. There's no question about that. That's not what this is about, though. I'm not an expert on that. I totally believe that cruelty has no point in raising our food supply. So I study more on that end, and I will say that like let's say you're a carnivore, okay? So I think we can all agree to go get the most natural, humanely farm-raised animals out there. And even if you don't give two shits about animals, which is your personal preference, you should know that those animals, how they're raised and treated, impacts your food supply. In other words, if you go get cattle that has been grazing on grass, which is what it's supposed to be grazing on, not the cornmeal that it's fed, which is making it fat, and it has all of these different pollutants in it because of what's in the cornmeal and the preservatives and the steroids and all this kind of stuff. If you are going to eat that, then just find the good grass-fed beef, normal. So in other words, the animals in their normal habitat is what we should all be striving to eat. The plants properly grown in their natural soil is what we should be trying to eat. That's the middle ground I want us to find. Whether you're plant-based, great. But you can get plants out there that are absolute garbage. For example, most of your breakfast cereals are plant-based, of course. They all are, right? I'm trying to think if there's any protein additives in any of it. I'm sure there is, but even that's probably, quote, plant-based, but it can still be plant garbage. That just means that they're white flour made basically in test tube type plants. They're definitely not like whole wheat that's being raised out there, or corn. And to try to find corn that hasn't been polluted in this country, good luck. It's pretty much almost doesn't exist. So, sorry for anybody that might be farming it. If there's locals, great, that's great. But most of the corn we get is absolutely polluted with crap. So you can be on a plant-based diet and be eating complete just garbage. Food that's just been stripped down of all of its nutrients, and food that has had so much additives added to it that it's supposed to stay good on the shelves for like 10 years. Hate to break it to you, that's not the way food was supposed to be eaten. It's supposed to be eaten, cut, and eaten, so the best we can to get close to that, which I know it's very difficult. I absolutely get that. But what I'm saying is because maybe the carnivores, get mad and say, well, there's a lot of crap food in plant. Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. I try to go to the farmer's market and get the vegetables that have been locally grown, the fruits that have been locally grown and raised. Absolutely. And again, if you're eating the meat or, eating the dairy, like, I try to get away from, but I haven't been overly successful at, trying to make sure that the cows that the dairy is coming from has been grass-fed, properly raised. And there has been studies on the stress release of the animals that affects the food supply. So like, even if we don't get that, we shouldn't be cruel, and that's not what this is about. This is about the podcast on how to eat healthfully. Then understand that affects the meals too, the food chain too. But in any event, trying to find that dairy the cows have been locally raised, eating grass and all that, kept at the appropriate weight and not pumped full of pharmaceuticals and steroids, growth hormones, and all the other stuff that they do to simply increase the size, which is going to increase the money that they get for that particular cow. There is a price to be paid for everything. It's not good to be eating that stuff. You can look at, everybody wonders, or it is often wondered, I should say, why on earth are so many kids at 13 looking like 18-year-olds now as far as their, maturity levels, physical maturity levels. It's like, well, they've been consuming steroids since they were a baby, So that's, I laugh, but it's not funny. That's just the difference. Everybody's worried about the PEDs and the professional athletes' performance-enhancing drugs and the steroids. It's like, well, you've been raised on them. So, it's in just about everything that you eat, especially if you do eat more carnivore, if you are a meat eater and you're not getting your meat from organic sources, which, that's the first time I use that word today, because we do have to watch that. We have to watch that organic term a little bit, because not everything is as organic as we would like it to believe, even if it gets the nice seal of approval, it is far better to go directly to the source and try to get your meat or your vegetables. When appropriate, sure, go organic, but look, I'm just going to say I'm not completely sold on that. Looking around at some food I have on the shelf right now, and it's absolutely got the organic seal. I'll do that when I can, but I'll also say I'm not 100% convinced on that, and I would rather go to the apple orchard where they're picking the apples and say, hey, let me get a bag of these. I would much rather, if appropriate, find the place to get the natural raised cows with grass-fed cows producing the dairy. And I'm not a chicken eater, but if I was, definitely, see the chickens raised as they should be, without certain food processes thrown to them that they're eating and ingesting different drugs and all these kind of things, which again happens. So again, this is the middle ground, hopefully, that we can say. It's like, well, I believe in eating meat. Okay, can you maybe just understand, though, that you want to get it the way nature intended that meat to be? And the same with carbohydrates, to the best of your absolute ability. Really read food labels, really see where things come from, get things as naturally grown as possible. And look, times are changing. It is happening more and more. Now, of course, the elephant in the room is price, and it's easy for me to sit back and say, well, to me, it's worth it. It is, but I also understand that if I was living paycheck to paycheck, then it might not be as natural for me to make that statement. So I get it. It can be very, very expensive. I get it. I will say, again, I believe it's worth it, but again, I can also empathize and say, that's easy for you to say. You're not living paycheck to paycheck, so I 100% get it. But I do think we can all do our absolute best in all of these situations to try to get the best food. Keyword is best food we can in every situation. I can tell you this, you're not going to get that at fast food. You're not going to get that in a bag. You're not going to get that with cellophane wrapped over it, right? I mean, you're just not going to get it in those places. And so I think, have to do the best we can to, maybe save our money, put it more towards that, and possibly less on other things. But again, that's not for me to say. It's not a judgment call. I'm just acknowledging that at this point in 2022, I understand that it's more expensive for sure. And it's that way for a reason. If you want to study where that came from, I'm not going to state any different politicians' names, because that's not, get people fired up on one end or the other, because I could tell you that it was a collaborative effort in the 1970s among two different administrations, actually, where the whole idea was to get cheap food. And in fairness to the politicians, it's actually a very interesting read. Go back and just study, Google, food industry in the 1970s and just put in cheap food, early 70s. And you will see that basically it was the supply and demand. Politicians are like, okay, I mean, if that's what y'all are calling for, that's what I have to do, because the inflation rates were so crazy, people couldn't afford food. So the solution was, we got to make cheap food, and that's where a lot of processing began in our country of the United States, at least United States. We're kind of getting what we paid for. We're getting what we asked for. Cheap food, cheap meat, cheap carbs, cheap fruit, canned vegetables. We're getting all of it because people couldn't afford to eat. So I get it. Cost is 100% of a factor for sure. That's where it came from. So then to go against that, then you have to have a little more money to spend. I totally get it. I'm not trying to not acknowledge the fact that price is a factor. All right, so I'll leave that there. Study that. It's actually very interesting. I will say that we are now starting to see sort of a shift back, and of course, a lot of times, the market is causing that. So there are groups out there that see profit. They see, okay, so we need more whole foods, and there are services to do that, and I've got no problem with that. Sometimes, that's what we need to shift things a little bit. Then hopefully we get enough competition out there, and then we can bring the prices down on that end of it. But there are solutions, is all I'm saying on that. And I will say that, personally, when I go to the different farmers markets, and I tend to frequent the one down in New Smyrna often, the prices aren't bad. I mean, you go down there, and I guarantee you're going to pay less for those fruits and vegetables down there than you are at the grocery store. And most of them, not all of them, but most of them, and they package the ones that are from out of state, but most of them are locally raised. They're grown locally. They even show you where from, the different Samsula farms or whatever. And you take them home, you wash them, you eat them, but it's really not any more expensive. In fact, it's cheaper. We can walk out of there with 2 huge recycled bags, those grocery bags you can buy at Publix or wherever, and pay maybe $30 for 2 big bags of different vegetables. And then I stop at the little bread thing, and I get some of the supposedly locally made breads, and they state where that comes from too. So it can be done. It absolutely can be done. And so I just want to try to get everybody on the same page this week with food and go, okay, so it's not really a battle of carnivore versus totally a plant-based or veganism. So yeah, let's say veganism is one extreme, carnivore is the other. Okay, so regardless of where you line up on that, probably has a lot to do with other issues versus fitness and health, okay? So that's not what this is about. So now let's say, so if we want to be healthy, how do we come to the middle and just all agree that we have to get the best food source available? Maybe if we just look at it that way each day, the best available. Like one day it just may be as simple as I'm going to have this frozen vegetable at home versus this French fry at a fast food. Is the frozen vegetable great? I mean, it's not bad. Is it great? No. Is it better than the fast food? Absolutely. So maybe we just all say to ourselves, what is the best food source I can get today? And what does that mean? It means that the more processed it is, the more preservatives it's been given to withstand shelf life, the worse it is. The more pharmaceuticals, remember that, think of it that way, drugs pumped into the farm animals to also make them grow and preserve them, the less healthy that is, okay? So that's how we look at it, like what's pumped into it, what is it eating? So remember that. It's not necessarily what you eat, although that matters, but it's also what do you eat eats, all right? What does what you eat eat? Does it eat its natural, what it's supposed to? Does the cow eat the grass, or does the cow eat the cornmeal that it's not really in nature designed to eat, all right? Does the chicken eat what it's supposed to eat, or is the chicken eating cornmeal and other stuff, picking it up and becoming this huge Jose Canseco looking chicken out there, Yeah, hopefully you guys remember who that is, but we all like rag on people like that. It's like, oh, drug user, roid head. It's like, well, you know what? Go to Kentucky Fried Chicken, so are you. I mean, you're eating them too. You just didn't know it. You're just eating it at a low dose all the time, but you're still consuming it. Not on purpose, probably, but, we just need to really look at that and just meet in the middle and say, how can I get the best food source I can eat? And how do I demand it? And oftentimes we demand things with our pocketbook. I mean, just if more and more people want healthy, good alternatives and start spending their money that way, there's going to be more alternatives out there. That's just the way the economy works, So, but it has to mean something to you. It's got to mean it to you. I mean, it can't be, you have to look at it and go, this is a choice I make. And I do think there's an evolutionary process on this. Again, I'm a living testament to that. I mean, in the 80s and 90s when I was first getting my college degrees and I was working out and I was in the fitness and health, really thought I was doing all I should do. I mean, I had no concept of the cleanness of food. That was, eating clean meant eating like no fat and eating complex carbs and protein. It didn't mean what it means now. Now eating clean means eating without preservatives, drugs, and pharmaceuticals and pesticides. That's what it means now. Then that was never even a consideration because we just assumed, everything's fine. And look, again, it's not blaming, the corporations per se. It's our choice. They're doing what they do. I mean, again, go back and study the 1970s. You'll see they were simply supplying that demand that was pushed up on them. I mean, it was like, we'll pay you this amount of money to make cheap food. Boom. And you know what? It's still going on to this day. It is still going on to this day. Not to open up a whole rant, but if you talk to the local farmer, they're going to be like, oh yeah, we're screwed. But it still goes on to this day. The subsidies that are given to the giant farms, it's like, okay, but again, that's what people wanted. Everybody's like, well, damn government, damn corporations. It's like, everybody was bitching there wasn't any cheap food out there. So it's like, in order to get elected, this is what had to be done. And again, it was both sides, not just one. They, don't get so fooled by all that, and I'm not going to go in that direction. But the bottom line is, both sides did it. Study the 1970s. You will see the food bills that were introduced. And you get cheap food. And to get cheap food, that's what you got to do. You got to whiten it down. You got to add pesticides. You got to add preservatives, And then on the cattle side, you got to add, what's going to increase the girth of the cows to make them more profitable and make more and da-da-da-da-da. And here we are. But I'm a big believer in personal choice. Go out and say, you know what? This is what I need. This is what I need. I'm listening to this guy. He seems like he knows what he's talking about. This is what I need. I want clean food. So just make it a commitment. What can you eat clean this week? What can you eat clean? Think about it that way. Until next time, and by the way, if you listen, I'm very accessible. I mean, I'm on social media. If you don't know me personally, I take emails, fittothemax.net or rob.maxwell@fittothemax.net, either one. Email me and just say, hey, this is a topic I'd like to talk about, or I don't like what you said about this. And, I'm more than willing to talk. I want to talk fitness. That's what I do. So, again, fitmax@bellsouth.net or fitmax@bellsouth.net or rob.maxwell@fittothemax.net. Okay? So until next time, be Max Fit, be Maxwell, eat clean. Clean means clean. All right? Clean means clean. Try to get away from pesticides, growth hormones, and anything that's not natural to your food source. Okay?